Released in 1967, Cool Hand Luke is the story of a former Marine who is imprisoned for defacing public property. Upon being approached by law enforcement, Luke breaks out in a large smile. After arriving at the prison, he tells the captain he could say that I wasn't thinking when asked what he thought his sentence was. Towards the end of his journey, Luke comments that he never plans ahead. At first, Luke is at odds with the inmates who precede him, going as far as boxing the head of the syndicate. Over time, however, all the inmates become friends and help Luke with his various attempts to escape. Luke's attitude towards life is exemplified by his bluff in a poker game, and his smile is what ultimately makes him a member of the gang. We will spoil the end of the movie later, but anticipating what the final scenes brought to mind, we need to discuss Albert Camus' 1942 essay, The Myth of Sisyphus. Early in Camus' reflection, he recalls being told of the suicide of a man 5 years after the death of his daughter. That event had undermined him. It had given him cause to think. The chain of events, however, that lead to such a dramatic end need not be as tragic. It can be as simple as the weariness that a week can cause, or certain birthdays. All that separates an actor from his stage is what Camus called the absurd. Our confrontation with a world that is indifferent to us, and our desire for a rational unity, is what creates the absurd. 3 consequences follow: freedom, passion, and revolt. That human beings are free, and once accepted, the absurd becomes a driving force, and that the most coherent position one can have is a constant state of revolt, is the conclusion that Camus reaches. I will not be focusing on the central question of Camus' essay, suicide, whether life is worth living. Luke's predicament seems to be of a different sort. At best, one could say he has a death wish. Nonetheless, for reasons I hope will be clear by the end, absurdism is an apt philosophy to understand the film. Another question that is raised in this essay: what is the relationship between a meaningful life and a reason to live is relevant. It is not valid to say that if life has no meaning, one must kill themselves, or that this is why men kill themselves. Life has no meaning, this is a truism, but that neither means that it has no reason, nor that one should just die because of it. Not just this, but as Camus noted, a good reason to live, or a reason to fight for, is just as good as a reason to die for. Since the world is indifferent to us, and our freedom only has meaning within its limits, then quantity is better than quality. Living more is best, and since all actions are equivalent, and living serves as the basis for more living, and we cannot destroy the world in any metaphysical sense, we should not destroy ourselves, since that would be a contradiction against the absurd. How should we analyze the actions of someone like Luke? Camus proposes a method, inspired by Nietzsche, that finds in the behaviors, deeds, and consequences the material for a practical evaluation of what we do. Throughout the film, Luke is put in solitary confinement, escapes from jail 3 times, returns to prison twice, being subject to pointless punishments such as digging and filling the ditch, being broken at one point in the movie, and becoming the lackey of the guards. Overall, it would seem that Luke doesn't have motivation in life aside from escaping prison. Not a bad goal, but no romantic, creative, political drive seems to motivate him. He seems to be on the edge of perceiving the absurd and revolting, but falls just short. At the end of the movie, after hijacking a truck and escaping, Luke finds himself in a church where he reaches out to God. As Camus noted in Christian Metaphysics and in Neoplatonism, the early Christians were marked by pessimism, derived from a fear of death, living amongst other men, and sin, and the hope of being reached and redeemed by God through the incarnation, the Word made flesh. Luke may not have the early Christians' pessimism, but when he calls out to God in the church, an approximation of God seems to be his desire, to gain unity with the world through faith. By leaping to faith, by rejecting reason and mortal beings, his actions are typical of what Camus called philosophical suicide, knowing of the absurd nature of existence and shrinking from it. Again, it seems that Luke falls short of realizing the absurd nature of the situation. He is on the verge of this realization, well on the path, but doesn't quite reach it by the end of the movie. Turning to the start of the movie, we see Luke drinking in public and destroying public property. We aren't given much details about our protagonist. We learn that he has a hard time holding down jobs, a former lover abruptly abandoned him, and he is ex-military, and that he ended his service at the same rank he started at, after ultimately being demoted. When asked why he did it, he simply answered he had a score to settle. It would seem then that Luke feels estranged from the country he lives in, and directs his anger at objects that stand in his place. As Marx pointed out, in a capitalist society, men enter social relations that alienate or separate themselves from important aspects of living. We become estranged from our labor, the products it creates, other men, what makes us generally human. And as Fromm noted, it is through man's central practical activity that men appropriate the natural world and turn it part of the subject. Not only this, but as Schaff adds, our relationships also appear to us in alienated form. The most dangerous of these forms he called objective alienation. The state. Destroying public property would seem to indicate frustration with the America Luke lives in, specifically the organized hierarchical society that they are the results of. The final line of Camus' essay asks us to see Sisyphus not as a defeated figure, but as someone who finds reason in rolling his boulder up the mountain and striving down the other side to begin again. The last time we see Luke, he is dying in a police car, smiling. The final scene shows the leader of the syndicate, upon returning to prison, telling the other inmates about Luke's end, about his smile. The men all seem reassured by this, comforted by this, that despite all the hardships Luke had faced, being shot in the neck and bleeding to death, at the end, just as in life, he was able to smile. There is something bittersweet about this ending, of course. On the one hand, the ability to find joy in hardship is sure to be admired. On the other hand, the lack of clear goals or strategies to overcome the objective conditions that lead to hardship, stifling hierarchies, frustrated love lives, unstable career paths. Without a clear political revolt, what other conclusion could Luke's life have? We are left with two options then, two methods, with metaphysical and political implications. Are we separate and distinct from the world, as can be thought, and hence governed by different logics? Or is it our relationship to each other and our means of existence that condition our lives, as Marx thought?